Defense is a necessity, but offense is a choice. And the vehicle that gets you there is your feet. But some of us are getting left high and dry when we think we could get into those positions, and some of us aren't getting there at all. So in this video, we're going to be going over the things that it takes to actually have aggressive footwork and to be able to execute those shots from the positions on the court. Welcome back to the video. Let's get started. So let's clear a few things up. When I say defense is a necessity, what I mean is no matter what happens, if somebody attacks you and the ball isn't in your reach, if you don't go there, you lose a point. You need to be able to move. But when we talk about offense, offense is a decision. Offense is a choice to change from one mode of movement to another in order to be more aggressive and not just keep the ball in play. And there are some key and distinct differences between one and the other. So in the footwork that we're going to be covering, I want you to think about the fact that you could always go back to just being neutral or defensive, but it's going to take more intensity, more clear decision making, and more positioning in order to execute these patterns. There's a couple of them to go through, but as soon as you understand the difference between the two, you're going to recognize way more opportunities to be offensive just by shifting your footwork at a split second. So as boring as it is, we have to start at the beginning, and the beginning I'm talking about is the split step. A lot of people start their movement cycles badly from this position. So when we look at the split step, there are a couple different ways that we can set our feet. Most people find themselves in this narrow zone where I kind of highlighted it with the yellow cones. And what I mean is they'll be in their normal ready position, moving their feet, and their split step will only be about this wide. What that does is that allows you to casually kind of move into position, and you can move pretty quickly, but it's not going to be as explosive as if we lower ourselves and widen ourselves into this orange cone stance. And what happens is, or what establishes the difference is what happens when we bend our knees. In this stance here, when I bend my knee, you can see my body weight kind of shifts from one side to the other. Whereas if I slide my feet into this position, when I bend my knees, my body kind of goes more up and down. What that means is if I split step from the narrow position, I kind of sit up. Whereas if I split step from the wider position, my body weight shifts laterally. And that's super important for being more explosive because we have to be able to position ourselves in a very specific way, which means we have to get out of the starting gate very quickly so that we have time to do things when we get to the position where the ball is. So establishing the right split step from the very beginning is the foundation of everything else that we're going to do today. So assume that everything that we do today is based on this split step and not this one. Okay, so one thing that you have to understand when it comes to aggressive footwork is we do not deal in straight lines when we are at the baseline. Everything that we do on defense is linear, and everything that we do on offense is circular. What I mean is, if you see this ball that's sitting right here and I shift myself over into this position, a very neutral or defensive movement cycle would be to split here, move straight to this position, and hit the ball. There's nothing wrong with it, but when we look at the aggressive mentality and the aggressive footwork, we have to do something a little bit different. These two lines right here are going to be the only thing you need to understand the difference. I'm going to take this line, and I'm basically going to create a little obstacle for myself. Now what happens is from this wide base and split step, I shift around this and then get into this position, which is creating a slightly more circular movement. At the end of that, I get more momentum into the ball, and I get more of an open set of options on what I can do aggressively, heavy, more directions. All those things are going to work just by adding this thing. But as you can see, this is a decision, not a necessity. As I said, there's nothing wrong with just going right over into this position, but when you choose to be aggressive, the adding of the little extra steps in order to hit that ball just a little bit better has to become more automatic and recognize when you're going to have time to do something like this. Because another problem with being offensive is you have to discern when you have time and when you don't. If I was to make this move backwards and the ball is faster than I can move into it, now I'm giving up court space and I'm going to be back in this position when I go for the swing. So just be aware that all the movement that we're doing, when you choose to go more circular, you have to choose it on the right ball. So switching to the backhand angle, the circular motion and the idea is still the same, but the difference over here is you can choose to go with a forehand or a backhand. So I'm just going to practice shadowing the movement itself and throwing the ball to Emily, who you guys all remember. But just remember that as I go back, I'm making the decision on how much time I have to actually move forward. So as that opponent strikes that ball, As soon as I do this, I've decided to take a more aggressive path versus just going and assuming that it's going to be a backhand and hitting a backhand from there. I could choose to either back up and then hit a more aggressive backhand, or even if I'm fast enough, wide split, get around, and then use that forehand. But creating this mental obstacle of something being in your way is all it takes to start training the aggressive circular movement right from the beginning. So now switching to a live example, wide split step, circular movement, choosing if it's going to be a forehand or a backhand. Quick side note though, one thing you want to try not to do is shuffle, because that moves you slower, especially if you choose to go with the forehand. You're going to want to do some crossovers, which are going to cover more distance, and then shuffle as you start to move your body weight forward. Back, forward, in, crossover, forward, into the ball. Back, forward, into the shot, crossover, in, and through. So aggressive move number 2, what do we do when we want to be aggressive and somebody fires it right at us, or the ball's just coming at us in a position where we could get jammed up? We're going to do what's called a drop step or a gravity step, but with a couple of different caveats. Most people, when they do this drop step, they kind of load their body weight and they get stuck in this position. What we're going to do is we're going to rebound off of this back leg and make sure that we set our rackets before our foot actually touches the floor. So you might actually have to go with a more compact motion. So if I set my racket very small and quick, as soon as my foot touches the floor, I can shift my body weight right back into the court. So if somebody attacks me right down the middle and I do the aggressive split step, I can pull that whole move off before the ball clears the net in most cases, if you recognize that you're going to try to go with the aggressive option. Again, if the ball came to me, I could just as easily go split to the side and hit the ball right there, but it's not going to be as aggressive. And we're talking about aggressive footwork options. This also works on the backhand side. Split, rebound back, and then extend out. Same thing with two hands, back, and then forward. But you have to make sure your racket is set before your foot touches the floor. If you touch the floor first and then you start setting your racket, you're wasting time in the back. And now you actually need a loaded motion to push forward. Whereas if you have your racket set early, you rebound and go right back into the forward motion. So just again, with a quick illustration of the setup, if this ball isn't behind me completely when my foot touches the floor, then that means I'm wasting time in the back. So from this split step, the ball has to actually beat me into this position, so that when I touch the floor, the rebound allows me to just immediately throw the racket or throw the ball right back into this position. So at normal speed, you might see people doing this. And at that point, they've wasted too much time in the back and they're stuck. What we're gonna actually wanna see is split and then immediately rebound out. And again, like I said, you might have to shorten your motion for this to be effective, but what you're doing tactically is you're actually creating what I call fake space. Let's say I'm hitting in an open stance or they fire a ball at me. The ideal contact point from this position would be about here. Now, by dropping my right leg back into that rebounded or loaded position, my ideal contact point is now here, and I'm able to shift my weight into the ball with a little bit of extra time. So I went to a closed stance, which is more aggressive because I'm allowed to shift my weight, but at the same time, I can hit through a ball while giving myself time rather than staying here up on top of the baseline, but hitting more neutral. So again, with the quick setup, it's going right out into that position. You might find yourself actually pivoting further into the court if you're really rebounding hard, but the main thing is that the body weight has to stay going forward through contact. Don't get too handsy with this and start trying to lift up. Your body weight's going forward, your racket should be going forward, and everything should be matching that momentum every time. So one last time with the quick setup, it would be, I'll just do this with one hand, back, and then forward. So now switching into the racket position, I'm gonna have the ball fed to me. I'm gonna do this slow for about 2 or 3 reps, and then I'm gonna speed it up. So you've got the split, the quick setup, and then the racket out. Again, a little faster split, racket's already here, and then I go up. Last time, racket goes back first, and then I'm able to shift my weight. So now this one will be out of necessity. This will be off of a faster incoming ball, and I'll need to get everything set quick enough to be able to rebound and stay offensive rather than going with the more neutral and lifted or loopy response. So in most scenarios, what most people would do is the ball would come flying at them and they'd go, and it'd go with the more upward lifted motion. As you guys saw, I was in this same position from where I started. Now, if I switch to this, I can attack that ball with the same incoming force. So from shifting my weight backwards quickly, I can rebound right into that ball with the same amount of time that Emily's giving me. One more. Now, for the sake of saving time, I'm not demonstrating it on the backhand side because I'd have to do a one-handed backhand and a two-handed backhand. But all the stuff I just did on the forehand applies to the other side. Now, what I was saying in the beginning about the baseline being very circular and defense being linear, that applies 50% of the time when we go into the court. What I mean is, when we go towards the net or towards the service line, you have to have that circular motion done before you show up to the ball so that you spaced yourself before it's time to strike. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to get there first. They get there and then they have to get out the way, which completely stops or negates all their momentum. Yeah, they're close in the court, but then they try to make up for that by going big with their arm. What we're going to do is we're actually going to do little half circles as we approach the net, and we're going to end up with our momentum being able to continue going forward. Now, when I said 50% of the time, the reason why it's not all the time is because sometimes the shorter balls are closer to the sidelines, and we need to just kind of understand where we're going to intersect with that ball when it's moving down the line or when it's moving short into the court. So if the ball is more central, then we're going to be doing these half circles, and we're going to be very around the ball first. And if the ball is more to the sides, we're going to take a more linear approach and just cut off the angle of the ball before it gets too far. So using these cones as illustration for what I said about people moving forward too much, if this orange cone is my contact point, I need to be spaced out about this much when I go to strike where the ball would be, assuming that the ball's right over top of this orange cone. What most people end up doing, which is what costs them the power and the aggression, is they move forward to where they know the ball is going to be. They show up and then they step off of the path to then space themselves out to strike the ball. The problem is your momentum has now taken a complete 90-degree turn, and now all your power is going to be primarily driven by how fast you can swing your racket. If we were to make just a simple adjustment of rounding this approach, what I'm going to end up doing at the end is just continuing my momentum forward as I strike the ball. And most people make that simple and easy mistake so difficult to overcome, and then they learn how to hit the ball a lot harder from the arm without recognizing that there are significantly easier ways to pull this off. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten video requests on how you guys struggle with attacking short balls. Something this simple is probably the thing that's in your way. There's technical things that I talked about in all the other videos, but I would say probably more than 50% of you are just doing this part wrong. So now Emily's going to feed me a ball that sits up in the middle, and you're going to see that as long as my racket is set early where I don't have to stop my momentum and I make this little circular motion, I can get all of my momentum through the ball, I can get my racket through the shot, and I can be aggressive without having to make any last-second adjustments. Racket's already back, and then through. Racket's already back, and my body weight shifts. Racket back, side step, and through. Now all that jumping and unloading is all matching the shot that I'm hitting because I'm able to push straight up into the ball rather than jumping away from it. Let me show you guys what would happen if I did it the other way. Forward, and then off the ball. You can see that it's makeable, but you can hear a difference in the pop that comes off of the shot. One more time. Now moving around the ball, completely different sound. So now shifting into what I said about the ball being not as central, this is probably going to be the easiest one for you guys to do as long as you follow the rules that we had with some of the stuff we did on the baseline. So when I say some of the rules about the baseline, make sure your racket is set significantly before you get to that spot. The worst thing you can do is position yourself perfectly, and then when you start setting your racket, the ball now moves into a position that isn't as ideal or as hittable. So as you go to cross that baseline, make sure the racket's completely ready so that your momentum never has to stop. That goes for the forehand side or the backhand side. This is actually the easiest one to space. You're just going to get to wherever that gate is. So you see I set up basically two gates over here and here. You get there with the racket already set. The only thing you have to pay attention to is where your feet are lined up. If you close your body off too much, now your target or your potential targets are behind you technically. If you look at the way my feet are set, cross court is behind me. So you want to make sure that you take your back leg and on the very last step, you line that step up with where you are most likely to want the ball to go. Don't worry about your opponent being able to read your leg position or your body position. You're so close to them and you're bringing momentum through the shot that even if they can see where it's going, you've cut away so much time that they have to react to it that they still feel just as pressured and just as defensive than if you had not done that. So now quick demonstration on the forehand side first. I just move up again as I'm crossing that baseline, racket gets set, through the gate, cross court, and bring it that way. You can see I lined up my feet at the very last second, so everything was easy to push that way. This time I'll go down the line. Rack it up, set up, and then I just go right through there. My feet were lined up that way. No real mystery to where I'm going, but because I'm so close to them, there's no time to react. And now shifting to the backhand angle, same exact thing. Racket gets set. I'm going to do this one slow first. If you look at where my body is set, especially on backhands, people tend to overcross, and then they end up having to manipulate their hands a lot to get to that shot. Make sure that foot lines up either behind or on the outside to just make sure your momentum is able to be continuous as you strike the ball. So shifting back a little bit, now I'll do it all together. Line up my feet, forward into the ball, and then I'm able to hit that shot. Now I'm gonna go really hard from way further back. Yep. Ball's here, line up the feet, and I go straight through. I'm gonna take one cross, that means I have to take my left foot out first. Left, and then right to there. But that's gonna wrap up today's video, guys. I hope it was helpful. Remember, your feet are the vehicle that gets you there. And some of you guys have broken down vehicles that are leaving you high and dry. All you have to do is just be very specific on the few key details we worked on. Are your feet lined up in the right place? Are you moving more circular? Are you a person that's moving more linear? Any of these things could hamper your ability to make these moves, and then you'll feel like you can't really be aggressive and you're always swinging extra hard and not really getting the results that you want. If you know anybody that would benefit from this stuff or needs to work on being more aggressive, please send this video off to them. I have a couple of big announcements in the works for the next coming months, but until the next video and until those announcements, I'll see you guys in the next one.